My high school bully is now my wife's personal trainer. He just texted me saying we need to talk man to man. My wife Joan and I have been married for 4 years and together for 7. We met in college when I finally grew into myself after years of being the awkward kid nobody wanted to sit with. In high school, I was overweight with bad acne and zero confidence. I was an easy target. There was one guy named Tyler who made it his personal mission to destroy me. He gave me a humiliating nickname and made sure everyone in school knew it. He tripped me in hallways. He knocked books out of my hands. He made comments about my weight loud enough for everyone to hear. The worst part was how charming he was to everyone else. Teachers loved him. Girls loved him. He was the golden boy who could do no wrong, and I was just the fat kid who couldn't take a joke. I left for college and never looked back. I lost the weight. I cleared up my skin. I got a good job and built a life I was proud of. I met Joan junior year and fell for her immediately. She knew I had been bullied, but I never went into details because I wanted to leave that version of myself behind. 6 months ago, Joan decided to get serious about fitness. She hired a personal trainer at a gym near her office. She came home raving about how great he was, how motivating, how he really pushed her. She showed me his Instagram and my stomach dropped. It was Tyler. Same face, same cocky smile, same guy who made my teenage years a nightmare. I told Joan immediately that he had bullied me in high school. She said people change and I should give him a chance. She said it would be awkward to switch trainers now. I didn't want to be controlling, so I let it go. Over the next few months, Tyler started showing up everywhere. Joan mentioned things he said during their sessions. She followed his diet advice and bought supplements he recommended. She talked about him constantly. Then he started texting her outside of sessions. She said it was just scheduling and nutrition tips. I asked to see the messages once and she got defensive and asked if I didn't trust her. I backed off. Last month, Joan invited Tyler to her birthday dinner. She said he had become a good friend. I sat across from him and watched him charm everyone just like high school. When Joan went to the bathroom, he leaned over and asked if I ever got over that nickname. He said it with a smile like friendly banter. I told him I didn't appreciate it. He laughed and said I was still the same sensitive kid I always was. He said some guys just never grow out of it. When I told Joan later, she said I was probably misreading him. She said Tyler mentioned I seemed tense and he was just trying to break the ice. She asked me to make more of an effort for her sake. Last night, everything changed. Joan left her phone on the counter when she went to shower. It buzzed and I glanced at it. The preview showed a message from Tyler saying he couldn't stop thinking about their conversation and that he meant what he said. I opened it. The messages went back weeks. He told her she deserved someone who appreciated her body. He told her she was wasting herself on me. He told her their connection was different, and he felt something the first time they met. She never shut it down. She sent hearts and said she felt confused. She said being around him made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. I screenshot everything and sent it to myself. When she got out of the shower, I was sitting on the bed, waiting. I asked if there was anything she wanted to tell me about Tyler. She said no. I showed her the screenshots. Her face went white. She started crying and saying nothing physical happened. She said it was just talking and she got caught up in the attention. She begged me to understand. I told her I needed time to think and I left. I drove around for hours and ended up at my brother's apartment. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time and then told me something that made my blood run cold. He said he saw Tyler's car parked outside my house 3 weeks ago when I was away for work. He didn't mention it because he figured Joan hired him for an at-home session. I never authorized any at-home sessions. I'm still sitting at my brother's place. Joan has called 23 times. Tyler just texted me for the first time ever. It says we should talk man to man. I haven't responded yet, but I'm about to. I sit in my brother's apartment staring at Tyler's text message, my hands shaking with a rage I haven't felt since high school. The words talk man to man feel like another power play, another attempt to make me the weak kid who couldn't fight back. I know responding right now would be a mistake, so I force myself to put the phone down and think this through clearly. My brother walks into the kitchen and starts making coffee without saying anything. The silence between us feels heavy but not uncomfortable. He knows I need time to process what he just told me about Tyler's car being at my house. The coffee maker gurgles and hisses as it brews, filling the small apartment with a bitter smell that matches how I feel inside. My brother finally sits across from me at his kitchen table, his face serious as he explains exactly what he saw 3 weeks ago. Tyler's black BMW was parked in my driveway at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday when I was in Chicago for that conference. He assumed Joan had scheduled a training session at home, but now we both know she never mentioned any home sessions to me. My brother describes how he almost stopped by but decided against it since my car wasn't there. He figured Joan was working out and didn't want to interrupt. The details make my stomach hurt worse than it already does. I pull up the screenshots on my phone again, reading every message between Joan and Tyler with fresh horror now that I know he was physically in my house. The timeline matches perfectly with my work trip to Chicago. There's a gap in their texting that day from noon until evening, hours of silence that suddenly makes terrible sense. My stomach turns as I realize what that silence probably means. I scroll through the messages looking for any hint about what happened during those missing hours, but there's nothing direct. Just Tyler's text later that night saying he couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Joan's response came at 10 p.m. with 3 heart emojis. I feel sick looking at it now. My brother watches me scroll through the screenshots but doesn't ask to see them. He already knows enough. I finally call Lucas, my friend from college who's now a lawyer, and explain the entire situation from Tyler's high school bullying to the current mess. Lucas listens without interrupting, which I appreciate because I need to get it all out in one go. When I finish, there's a long pause before he speaks. He tells me to document everything, change my passwords, and check our financial accounts for anything unusual. His calm, practical advice helps me shift from emotional chaos to strategic thinking. Lucas asks me to email him the screenshots right away, so he has copies in case Joan tries to delete anything. I do it while we're still on the phone, watching the email send with a strange sense of relief that someone else now has proof of what happened. Lucas asks if I want to know the legal definition of what might have happened based on the evidence I have. I tell him yes, even though part of me wants to stay in denial about the whole thing. He explains that emotional affairs can become grounds for divorce in our state, and if there was physical contact in my home, that adds another layer of betrayal that courts recognize. The way he says physical contact makes it sound so clinical and distant, but I know what he really means. Lucas tells me not to make any big decisions right now, that I should take time to think clearly before confronting Joan or Tyler. He reminds me that whatever I decide, I need to protect myself legally and financially first. I thank him and promise to call if anything else happens. I spend the next hour going through our bank statements and credit card records on my laptop. My brother brings me the coffee he made earlier, now lukewarm, but I drink it anyway. There's a charge to a hotel downtown from 2 months ago that I don't recognize, dated on a Saturday when Joan said she was at a girls' spa day with Scarlett. The charge is for $230 at a nice hotel near the waterfront. When I search my email for confirmation, I find nothing about me booking it, which means Joan used our joint card for something she hid from me. I take a screenshot of the charge and add it to the folder I'm building on my laptop. Each new piece of evidence feels like another punch to the gut, but I keep looking because I need to know everything. My brother suggests I stay with him for a few more days instead of going home tonight. He's worried about my mental state and thinks I need space to process everything before facing Joan again. I agree because the thought of sleeping in our bed right now, wondering what happened there while I was gone, makes me physically ill. My brother sets me up in his spare room, which is really just a converted office with a futon, but I'm grateful for it. He brings me a pillow and some blankets without making a big deal about it. I sit on the edge of the futon holding my phone, watching Joan's name light up the screen over and over as she tries to call me. Joan's calls keep coming through, 27 now, plus dozens of texts begging me to come home so we can talk. The texts start out apologetic and scared, but as the night goes on, they get more desperate. She says she'll explain everything if I just come home. She promises nothing physical happened with Tyler. She says she loves me and can't lose me over a mistake. I finally respond with a single message telling her I need time and space and that she should stay somewhere else for the next few days. She immediately calls again, but I silence my phone and put it face down on the table. My brother knocks on the door and asks if I want dinner, but I'm not hungry. He leaves a sandwich on the desk anyway. That night I barely sleep, my mind cycling through every moment of our 7 years together, looking for signs I missed. I remember how excited she was when she first started training with Tyler, how she'd come home glowing and energized. I thought it was just the endorphins from working out, but now I see it differently and it makes me feel like an idiot. She started buying new workout clothes and wearing makeup to the gym. She'd check her phone constantly and smile at messages she wouldn't show me. When I asked about her sessions, she'd give vague answers about sets and reps, never really describing what they talked about. All the red flags were there, and I ignored them because I didn't want to be the jealous, controlling husband. I trusted her completely and she used that trust against me. The next morning, I respond to Tyler's text with a simple message agreeing to meet, but on my terms at a neutral public location. I choose a coffee shop near my office for tomorrow afternoon, somewhere I feel comfortable and in control. His response comes immediately, just 3 words that somehow carry all his old arrogance. I can practically hear the smugness in those 3 words, the same tone he used in high school when he knew he'd gotten under my skin. My brother makes breakfast, and I force myself to eat some eggs even though my appetite is gone. He asks what my plan is for the meeting with Tyler, and I tell him I'm going to record everything and let Tyler talk. Bullies like Tyler always talk too much when they think they're winning. Lucas calls me back within the hour after I text him about the Tyler meeting, his voice concerned as he asks if I'm sure about doing this alone. I tell him I need to face Tyler myself, that running from him is what I did in high school, and I'm done being that person. Lucas is quiet for a second, then suggests something that makes complete sense. He says we're in a one-party consent state, which means I can legally record any conversation I'm part of without telling the other person. He explains that if Tyler admits anything on tape, it becomes evidence I can use later if I need it. I download a recording app immediately and spend the next 20 minutes testing it, making sure it picks up voices clearly even when my phone is in my pocket. I record myself talking from different distances, play it back, adjust the settings until I'm confident it will capture everything Tyler says tomorrow. Joan texts me again around noon, asking if we can please talk face to face because she needs me to understand what really happened. Part of me wants to ignore her, but I know I need answers to questions that keep spinning through my head. I agree to meet her, but I'm not doing it at our house where Tyler sat in our kitchen, where he might have done other things I don't want to imagine. I tell her to meet me at the park near her office during her lunch break tomorrow, somewhere public and neutral where I won't feel trapped. She responds immediately saying she'll be there, adding that she loves me and wants to fix this. I don't respond to that part because I don't know what I want yet. The next day, I get to the park 15 minutes early and sit on a bench facing the parking lot so I can see her arrive. My stomach is tight with nerves and anger, my hands clenched in my lap as I watch cars pull in and out. Joan's Honda appears at exactly noon, and she parks close to where I'm sitting. She gets out looking worse than I've ever seen her, her eyes puffy and red like she hasn't slept, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She's wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, which feels like manipulation, like she's trying to remind me of better times. She walks toward me and opens her arms for a hug, but I lean back and shake my head. Her arms drop and her face crumples, fresh tears starting before she even sits down. I tell her we need to talk honestly about everything, starting with the hotel charge I found and Tyler's car being at our house 3 weeks ago. Her face loses all its color, and she sits down hard on the bench next to me. Joan's hands start shaking as she wipes her eyes, and she admits she met Tyler at that hotel, but swears nothing physical happened between them. She says they just talked for hours about their lives and feelings, that she felt confused about everything and needed space to think away from our house. I stare at her and ask why she needed to rent a hotel room with our money just to talk to another man. She opens her mouth, closes it, then starts crying harder because she knows there's no good answer to that question. She says she knows how it looks, but she's telling the truth, that they sat in the hotel room and talked about his childhood and her feelings about our marriage and whether people can really change. I ask her if she paid for one room or two, and she whispers one room, which makes my chest feel like something is crushing it. I bring up my brother seeing Tyler's car at our house, watching Joan's face as I mention the specific day and time. She nods slowly and admits Tyler came over that afternoon to drop off some supplements he'd ordered for her training. She says he stayed for coffee, and they sat in the kitchen talking, that nothing happened in our bedroom or anywhere else in the house. I ask her why she never mentioned this visit to me, why she hid it if it was so innocent. She looks down at her hands and says she knew I'd be upset given my history with Tyler, that she thought it would be easier to just not bring it up rather than start a fight over nothing. The word nothing echoes in my head because a man who bullied me for years sitting in my kitchen with my wife while I'm out of town is not nothing. I tell Joan that hiding things from me because she knows they'll upset me is exactly what betrayal looks like, that our marriage was supposed to be built on honesty even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. She nods and keeps apologizing, saying she knows she messed up badly and got caught up in Tyler's attention. She begs me to understand that she felt lonely with all my work travel lately, that Tyler made her feel seen and appreciated in ways she hadn't felt in years. She says he listened to her talk about her day and remembered small details and made her feel special. I want to point out that making someone feel special is literally Tyler's job as a trainer. That charm is how he manipulates people. But I stay quiet and let her talk. I ask Joan directly if she's in love with Tyler, the question I've been afraid to ask because I'm terrified of the answer. She hesitates, her mouth opening but no words coming out, and in that pause of maybe 3 seconds, I know everything I need to know. She finally says she doesn't know, that she has feelings for him but also loves me, that she's confused and didn't mean for any of this to happen. Her inability to immediately say no, to firmly choose our marriage in this moment, breaks something fundamental inside me that I'm not sure can ever be fixed. I feel like I'm watching our 7 years together crumble into dust while she sits there unable to tell me she loves only me. I tell Joan she needs to stay with Scarlett or another friend while I figure out what I want to do next, that I need space in our home without her there. She protests immediately, saying it's her house too and she has rights. I remind her as calmly as I can that I'm the one who was betrayed here, that I'm the one who came home to find my wife having an emotional affair with my high school bully. She stops arguing and nods, saying she'll pack a bag tonight and stay with Scarlett. Her hands are shaking as she wipes her eyes again, and part of me wants to comfort her, but a bigger part remembers those hotel charges and Tyler's car in our driveway. Before Joan can leave the park, I tell her she needs to cut off all contact with Tyler immediately if there's any chance of saving our marriage. She agrees quickly, almost desperately, saying she'll text him right now that their training sessions are over. I watch her pull out her phone with trembling hands and type out a message saying she can't continue training with him and needs space. She shows me the message before sending it, and I nod. She hits send and I watch her face as she does it, noticing how devastated she looks, how her hands won't stop shaking. That tells me everything about where her heart actually is right now, and it's not fully with me. That afternoon at work, I sit at my desk staring at my computer screen, unable to focus on anything except Joan's hesitation when I asked if she loved Tyler. My boss walks by my office twice, then comes in and closes the door behind him. He asks if everything's okay at home because I've seemed distracted all week. I give him a vague answer about some personal issues I'm working through, not wanting to get into details about my marriage falling apart. He tells me to take whatever time I need, that family comes first, and the work will still be here. I appreciate his understanding more than he knows, and I tell him I might need a few days off soon to sort things out. The next day, I arrive at the coffee shop 15 minutes before I'm supposed to meet Tyler, wanting time to settle myself and get the recording app started on my phone. I order a black coffee I don't really want, and sit at a table in the back corner where I can see the entrance. I open the recording app, double-check the settings one more time, and hit record before putting my phone in my jacket pocket with the microphone facing out. My hands are sweating and my heart is racing as I wait, reminding myself that I'm not the scared kid from high school anymore. Tyler walks in right on time wearing gym clothes and that same confident smile that used to make me want to disappear. He spots me immediately and walks over, and for just a moment I feel 14 years old again, small and powerless. Then I remember the recording app in my pocket, the evidence I already have, and the fact that I'm not here to be bullied anymore. Tyler slides into the chair across from me, and his face immediately arranges itself into this fake, concerned expression that makes my skin crawl. He leans forward with his elbows on the table and asks if I'm doing okay, says Joan's been really worried about me, and he wanted to check in man to man. I cut him off before he can finish his performance, and tell him I know exactly what's been going on between them, that I have all the messages and the evidence. His smile falters for just a second before he catches himself and leans back in his chair, spreading his arms wide like this is all very amusing to him. He shakes his head slowly, and I can see him calculating his next move, trying to figure out how much I actually know and how much I'm bluffing. I keep my face neutral and wait for him to make his play because I learned a long time ago that Tyler can't stand silence, that he always needs to fill the space with his voice and his justifications. I ask him directly why he's doing this, whether destroying my marriage is some kind of revenge for me finally standing up to him at Joan's birthday dinner when he brought up that nickname. Tyler laughs, and it's the same dismissive sound from high school, the one that used to make me want to disappear into the floor. He tells me I'm being dramatic like I always was, that he and Joan just connected naturally, and he can't help it if she's attracted to someone who actually pays attention to her. The casual cruelty in his voice is so familiar, it makes my chest feel tight, and for a moment I'm 14 again, sitting alone in the cafeteria. He adds that maybe if I spent less time being insecure about the past and more time appreciating what I have, Joan wouldn't be looking elsewhere for connection. I force myself to breathe steadily and keep my hand in my jacket pocket near my phone, making sure the recording app is still running and capturing every word of this. Tyler leans forward again, and his voice drops like he's sharing some profound truth with me. He says Joan deserves someone who makes her feel alive, not some boring guy who works all the time and can't satisfy her the way she needs. He tells me she opened up to him about how our relationship has gotten stale, that I'm not adventurous enough, and our intimacy is basic and predictable. I feel my face burning with shame and anger because these are private things between Joan and me, things she had no right to share with him of all people. Tyler watches my reaction with obvious satisfaction and continues talking about how Joan told him she feels trapped in a marriage that doesn't challenge her anymore. I force myself to stay calm and keep him talking because every word he says is being recorded. Every confession of how he manipulated my wife is going straight into evidence I can use later. I tell Tyler that targeting my wife because you bullied me in high school is pathetic, that he's a grown man still acting like an insecure teenager who needs to prove something. His face darkens immediately, and the fake friendly mask drops completely. He leans across the table and tells me I always thought I was better than everyone once I lost the weight and got successful, that I walked around college and my adult life like I'd actually changed into someone important. He says I'm still the same weak person underneath all the surface improvements, that Joan sees through my act, which is why she's drawn to someone real like him. The venom in his voice reminds me of every hallway confrontation, every public humiliation, every moment he made sure I knew I was less than nothing in his world. I remind myself that I'm not that kid anymore, that I have evidence and leverage and the power to expose exactly what kind of person he really is. Tyler makes his critical mistake then by admitting he recognized my name the second Joan first mentioned her husband during one of their early training sessions. He says he thought it was funny that fate brought us back together like this, that he couldn't believe the universe handed him this opportunity. He tells me he wasn't planning anything at first, that he was just going to train Joan and take her money and maybe enjoy the private joke. But then he saw how easy it was to get her attention, how responsive she was to his compliments and his interest, and he couldn't resist seeing how far he could push it. This confession of deliberate manipulation is exactly what I needed him to say on tape. The proof that this wasn't some natural connection, but a calculated plan to hurt me through my wife. I keep my expression neutral, even though inside I'm screaming because he just admitted to using Joan as a weapon against me, to treating her like a pawn in some sick game of revenge. I ask Tyler if he actually has feelings for Joan, or if she's just another way to get at me after all these years. He shrugs like the question doesn't even matter, and says Joan's attractive and fun to be around, that the physical chemistry is real enough. But then he admits that mostly he enjoyed watching me squirm at that birthday dinner, knowing what was developing between them while I sat there trying to be civil. He says the look on my face when he mentioned the old nickname was worth everything, that seeing me still react like the scared kid from high school proved I never really changed. The casual way he dismisses Joan's feelings makes me realize she's being used just as much as I am, that Tyler doesn't actually care about her beyond what she represents in his ongoing need to prove he's superior to me. I think about playing her this recording and wonder if she'll finally understand that the connection she thought was real was just Tyler's latest way to destroy me. Tyler stands up to leave and tells me that Joan's going to choose him because he makes her feel things I never could. He suggests I make it easy on everyone and just file for divorce now, save myself the embarrassment of fighting for a marriage that's already over. He says Joan's already halfway out the door, and I'm just delaying the inevitable by trying to hold on to something that died months ago. I stay seated and look up at him standing there with that same cocky smile from high school, the one that used to make teachers think he was charming and girls think he was confident. I tell him calmly that I recorded this entire conversation and that Joan's going to hear exactly how little she actually means to him, how she was just a convenient tool to mess with me. I watch his face change as the words register, and it's the first time I've ever seen Tyler look genuinely worried about consequences. His confident expression disappears completely and gets replaced by something uglier, something desperate. Tyler reaches across the table trying to grab my phone, but I pull it back and stand up, putting the table between us. I tell him that assault in a public place would just add to his problems, and I can see other customers in the coffee shop starting to notice the commotion. He calls me a sneaky piece of trash and says I always was the type to hide behind rules and evidence instead of handling things like a man. I remind him that I learned from years of dealing with his bullying that bullies only respect strength and proof, that the only way to stop someone like him is to have documentation of exactly what they've done. Tyler looks around the coffee shop and realizes he's made a scene, that people are watching him try to physically intimidate someone over a phone. He backs off and tells me this isn't over, that I'll regret recording him without permission. I inform him we're in a one-party consent state, which means I had every legal right to record our conversation, and his face goes even paler. Tyler storms out of the coffee shop and I sit back down in my chair, my hands shaking so badly I have to put my coffee cup down before I spill it everywhere. My heart is racing, and I feel like I might throw up from the adrenaline crash. I sit there for another 20 minutes trying to calm down and process what just happened. The fact that I just confronted my high school bully and got him to confess everything on tape. I pull out my phone and listen to part of the recording to make sure it captured everything clearly. Tyler's voice comes through perfectly admitting he recognized my name, that he deliberately pursued Joan, that she was mostly just a way to get at me. Every cruel word and calculated confession is right there in clear audio. I send a copy to Lucas with a message saying I got everything we need, then I send another copy to my personal email as backup in case something happens to my phone. I call Joan and tell her I need to see her tonight, that I have something she needs to hear before we make any decisions about our marriage. She agrees so fast I can hear the hope in her voice, the assumption that maybe I'm ready to forgive her and move forward. I don't correct her because I want her to hear Tyler's words without any preparation or defenses built up, without time to rationalize or explain away what he said about her. We agree to meet at our house in 2 hours, and she asks if this means I'm coming home. I tell her we'll talk tonight and hang up before she can ask more questions. I sit in the coffee shop nursing my cold coffee and thinking about how Joan's going to react when she hears the recording, when she realizes the man she thought cared about her was just using her to hurt me. I drive back to my brother's apartment after leaving the coffee shop and spend the rest of the afternoon replaying the recording over and over, making sure every word is clear and captured exactly how Tyler said it. Lucas texts me asking how it went, and I send him a voice message explaining that I got everything we needed, that Tyler basically confessed to the whole thing on tape. He responds immediately saying he's proud of me for handling it that way, instead of losing my temper and doing something I'd regret. I text Joan around 5 telling her I need to see her tonight at our house, that there's something important she needs to hear before we make any decisions about what happens next. She responds within seconds asking if this means I'm ready to work things out, if I've decided to forgive her and move forward. I don't answer that question directly because I want her to walk in without any preparation for what she's about to hear, without time to build up defenses or explanations for Tyler's words. She texts back saying she'll be there at 7 and asks if she should bring dinner or if I want her to pick something up on the way. I tell her not to worry about food, that this isn't that kind of conversation. I get to the house around 6:30 and spend the next half hour pacing around the living room, my phone in my hand with the recording pulled up and ready to play. Part of me feels guilty for what I'm about to do to her, for the way her world is about to shatter. When she hears Tyler's true feelings, but the bigger part remembers how she defended him over and over, how she made me feel crazy for not trusting him. The doorbell rings at exactly 7, even though she has her own key, and when I open it, I can see she's put on makeup and done her hair, wearing the dress I always said looked good on her. She's smiling nervously and holding her purse with both hands, like she's trying to keep them from shaking. I step back to let her in, and she moves past me into the living room, her perfume hitting me with memories of better times when I didn't question whether my wife was being honest with me. Joan sits on the couch without me having to ask, and I stay standing near the TV, keeping some distance between us because I need to stay focused on what I came here to do. I tell her I met with Tyler today at a coffee shop, and her whole body goes rigid, her face turning pale as she asks what he said to me, whether he told me anything that would make things worse than they already are. I don't answer her question directly, just pull out my phone and tell her she needs to hear something, that I recorded our entire conversation and she needs to listen to all of it before she says anything. She starts to protest, saying she doesn't want to hear whatever lies Tyler told me, but I hold up my hand and press play before she can say anything else. Tyler's voice fills the room, admitting he recognized my name the second Joan mentioned her husband, that he thought it was funny fate brought us back together like this. Joan's face shows confusion at first, then shock as Tyler's voice continues explaining how he wasn't planning anything initially, but couldn't resist once he saw how easy it was to get her attention. I watch her eyes widen as Tyler describes pursuing her deliberately, as he laughs about how she fell for his act so completely. Her hand comes up to cover her mouth, and I can see tears starting to form, but the recording keeps playing. Tyler's voice getting more cruel as he admits she was mostly just a way to get at me, that he enjoyed watching me squirm at her birthday dinner, knowing what was developing between them. Joan starts shaking her head like she can make his words not be true, but his voice continues explaining that she's hot and fun to be around, but the real satisfaction was the game itself, seeing if he could take something from me again like he did in high school. By the time the recording gets to the part where Tyler says Joan deserves someone who makes her feel alive, but that person isn't really him either, she's sobbing so hard she can barely catch her breath. I let the recording play all the way through to the end, where Tyler tells me Joan's going to choose him and I should just file for divorce now, and then I stop it and put my phone back in my pocket. Joan is crying into her hands, her whole body shaking as she keeps saying she's so stupid over and over that she can't believe she fell for his act and threw away our marriage for someone who was just using her the entire time. She looks up at me with mascara running down her face and asks how she could have been so blind, how she didn't see what he was doing when I tried to warn her months ago. I feel this weird mix of satisfaction and sadness, watching her realize Tyler never cared about her at all, that everything he said and did was calculated to hurt me through her. Part of me wants to go sit next to her on the couch and tell her it's going to be okay, that we can get through this together. But the bigger part remembers all the times she chose to believe him over me, all the times she defended him when I expressed concerns about their relationship. She keeps apologizing and saying she knows sorry isn't enough, that she ruined everything for attention from someone who saw her as nothing more than a tool to hurt me with. I stay standing where I am and tell her that Tyler being a manipulative liar doesn't change the choices she made, that she still betrayed our marriage and put her confusion ahead of the vows we took 4 years ago. She nods and wipes her eyes with the back of her hand, saying she knows there's no excuse for what she did and she understands completely if I want a divorce. Her voice breaks on the word divorce, and she asks if there's any chance I could forgive her eventually, if maybe with time and therapy we could find a way past this. I tell her honestly that I don't know yet, that I'm still processing everything, and I can't make promises about forgiveness when I'm this hurt and angry. Joan asks what I need from her right now, and I tell her I need complete honesty about everything that happened with Tyler, no more hiding things or downplaying what went on between them. She takes a shaky breath and her hands are trembling in her lap as she admits they kissed twice, once at the hotel when they met there to talk, and once in our kitchen the day his car was parked here. She swears it never went further than kissing, that both times she stopped it because the guilt was eating her alive and she couldn't go through with anything more. I ask her if she's telling me the complete truth, or if there's more she's still hiding, and she looks me straight in the eyes and says, those 2 kisses were the extent of the physical contact between them. I don't know if I believe her completely because she's lied by omission so many times already, but at least she's being direct now instead of making me drag information out of her piece by piece. She asks if knowing that changes anything, and I tell her it doesn't really matter whether they had sex or just kissed, that the emotional betrayal is what destroyed my trust in her. She starts crying again and says she knows, that she understands the emotional affair was just as bad as a physical one would have been. I tell Joan she needs to find a new gym immediately and block Tyler completely from her phone and all social media, that if there's any chance of us working through this, she can't have any contact with him at all. She agrees right away and pulls out her phone with shaking hands, opening her contacts and blocking his number while I watch. Then she goes to Instagram and deletes him, then Facebook, showing me the screen each time so I can see she's actually doing it, and not just pretending. It feels like such a small thing after everything that's happened, but watching her cut him out of her digital life gives me this tiny bit of hope that maybe she's serious about fixing what she broke. She asks if there's anything else I need her to do, and I tell her that's a start, but rebuilding trust is going to take a lot more than blocking someone on social media. She nods and says she'll do whatever it takes, that she'll go to therapy and be completely transparent about everything from now on if I'm willing to give her that chance. Joan looks around our living room like she's seeing it for the first time and asks if she can move back home now that Tyler's out of the picture. I tell her not yet, that I still need space to process everything that's happened and figure out what I want for my future. She looks devastated, but she accepts it, standing up slowly and asking if she can at least grab a few more of her things to take back to Scarlett's place. I nod and follow her upstairs to our bedroom, watching as she pulls clothes from her closet and toiletries from the bathroom, with tears still running down her face. She moves carefully like she's afraid of doing something wrong, glancing at me every few seconds like she's checking to see if I'm still there or if I've changed my mind about letting her take anything. When she's packed a bag, she pauses at the bedroom door and tells me she loves me, that she knows she doesn't deserve another chance, but she's going to spend however long it takes, proving she can be the wife I deserve. I don't respond because I can't say I love her back right now, not when I'm this angry and hurt and confused about everything. She waits for a few seconds like she's hoping I'll say something, then walks downstairs and out the front door without looking back. After Joan leaves, I sit on our couch in the living room and finally let myself cry for the first time since this whole nightmare started. I've been holding everything together, staying strong and focused on gathering evidence and confronting Tyler. But now that I'm alone, the grief and anger come pouring out all at once. I cry for the marriage I thought we had that turned out to be built on incomplete honesty and my wife's willingness to believe a bully over her own husband. I cry for the version of myself that trusted Joan completely and never imagined she could betray me like this. I cry because even after hearing Tyler admit he was using her, part of me still wants to forgive Joan and try to save what we built together. The crying turns into full-body sobs, and I end up curled on my side on the couch, my face pressed into the cushions as years of pain from Tyler's bullying and this fresh betrayal mixed together into something overwhelming. Eventually, I run out of tears and just lie there feeling empty and exhausted, staring at the wall and wondering how I'm supposed to move forward from here. The next morning, I wake up still on the couch with a headache and my eyes swollen from crying. I check my phone and see messages from Joan asking if I slept okay and saying she's thinking about me, but I don't respond because I don't know what to say yet. Lucas sent me the name and number of a therapist he knows who works with trauma and betrayal, someone named Cordelia Waters, who apparently helped one of his other clients through a similar situation. I look her up online and see she has good reviews and specializes in helping people process both old wounds and current crises, which feels like exactly what I need right now. I call her office as soon as it opens at 9 and explain to the receptionist that I'm dealing with an urgent situation involving my marriage and childhood trauma resurfacing. She puts me on hold for a minute, then comes back saying Cordelia had a cancellation this afternoon and can see me at 3 if I can make it. I agree immediately and spend the rest of the morning trying to focus on work emails, but mostly just replaying everything that's happened over the past few days. I show up to Cordelia's office 15 minutes early and fill out intake paperwork asking about my history and what brought me to therapy. When she calls me back, she's a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a calm presence that makes me feel like I can actually talk to her honestly. I sit down in her office and spend the next hour telling her everything from Tyler's bullying in high school to him becoming Joan's trainer to the affair and yesterday's recording. She listens without interrupting and takes notes occasionally, nodding at certain points like she understands exactly what I'm describing. When I finish, she tells me that what Tyler did was deliberately exploit old wounds, that he recognized my vulnerability around him and used Joan to reopen trauma I thought I'd moved past years ago. She explains that Joan's betrayal hurt so much not just because of the affair itself, but because it confirmed the deepest fear Tyler planted in me back in high school, that I'm not good enough, and people will always choose someone like him over someone like me. Hearing her put it into words like that makes something click in my brain, helping me understand why this situation has felt so devastating beyond just the normal pain of infidelity. Cordelia asks me what I want for my future, whether I can imagine a path forward that includes forgiving Joan and rebuilding trust in our marriage. I tell her honestly that I don't know, that part of me wants to save what we built together because I do still love her somewhere under all this anger and hurt. But another part of me feels like maybe our foundation was weaker than I thought if Joan could be swayed so easily by someone like Tyler. If she could choose to believe his version of events over mine for months. Cordelia nods and says both of those feelings are completely valid, that I don't have to decide right now whether to stay married or get divorced. She suggests we focus first on processing the trauma from both the past bullying and the current betrayal, working through those feelings before I make any permanent decisions about my marriage. She says people often rush to make big choices when they're in crisis mode, but the healthier approach is to give myself time and space to heal before deciding what my future looks like. We schedule another appointment for next week, and she gives me some homework about journaling my feelings and identifying triggers that connect current situations to past trauma. I leave Cordelia's office feeling slightly less overwhelmed than when I arrived, like maybe there's a path forward, even if I can't see the whole thing yet. On the drive home, I start thinking about Tyler and whether he should face any consequences beyond just losing Joan and me knowing what he did. He admitted on tape to deliberately pursuing a client because she was married to someone he wanted to hurt, which seems like the kind of thing that could get him fired or at least reported to whoever oversees personal trainers. I remember Joan mentioning the gym owner's name once, something like Theo, and when I get home I look up the gym's website to find contact information. The owner is listed as Theo Barber, and there's an email address for general inquiries, so I send a formal message requesting a meeting to discuss a serious concern about one of his trainers. I keep it professional and vague, not wanting to explain everything over email, but making it clear this is important enough that he should meet with me in person. He responds within an hour saying he can see me tomorrow afternoon at 2, and that he's concerned by the formal tone of my message and wants to understand what's going on. I confirm the appointment and spend the rest of the evening preparing what I'm going to say, how much of the recording I should play for him, and what outcome I'm hoping for from this meeting. The next afternoon, I arrive at the gym 15 minutes before my 2 o'clock appointment with Theo. The front desk person tells me to wait in the lobby area, so I sit on one of those hard plastic chairs near the water fountain and watch people come and go from their workouts. My phone is in my pocket with the recording already queued up to the most damaging parts where Tyler admits he targeted Joan because she was married to me. I practiced what I was going to say on the drive over, keeping it professional and focused on the facts instead of my personal anger. Theo comes out to meet me right at 2, a tall guy probably in his 50s with gray hair and a firm handshake. He leads me back to his office, which is small and cluttered with filing cabinets and framed photos of bodybuilding competitions. He gestures for me to sit in the chair across from his desk and asks what this is about, his expression concerned but neutral. I start by explaining that I'm the husband of one of his clients, Joan, who has been training with Tyler for the past 6 months. Theo nods like he recognizes the names, so I continue by saying that Tyler and I have a history from high school where he bullied me badly, and that I recently discovered he's been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife. Theo's face shifts from neutral to serious as I talk, and he leans forward with his elbows on the desk. I tell him I have a recording of a conversation with Tyler where he admits to deliberately pursuing Joan because she was married to me, that this was calculated revenge for our high school history. Theo asks to hear the recording, so I pull out my phone and play the section where Tyler says he recognized my name immediately when Joan first mentioned her husband, that he thought it was funny fate brought us back together. Then I play the part where Tyler admits he wasn't planning anything at first, but couldn't resist seeing how far he could push it when he realized Joan was responsive to his attention. Theo's jaw tightens as he listens, and when I play the part where Tyler says Joan is just hot and fun to be around, but mostly he enjoyed watching me squirm, Theo actually swears under his breath. The recording ends and I put my phone back in my pocket, watching Theo process what he just heard. He sits back in his chair and runs a hand through his gray hair, looking tired and angry at the same time. He tells me this isn't the first time he's had concerns about Tyler crossing professional boundaries with clients. There were 2 previous incidents where female clients complained about Tyler being too friendly or making comments that felt inappropriate, and Theo addressed both situations with formal warnings that went in Tyler's employee file. He says he kept Tyler on because the guy is good at his job and brings in a lot of business, plus the complaints weren't severe enough to justify firing him at the time. But this recording changes everything, because Tyler is admitting to deliberately manipulating a client for personal revenge, which is completely unacceptable and probably violates multiple professional ethics standards. Theo thanks me for bringing this forward and says he needs to contact his lawyer today to figure out the proper termination procedures and protect the gym from any liability issues. He asks if I'm planning to take legal action against Tyler or the gym, and I tell him honestly that I haven't decided yet, but right now I'm focused on dealing with my marriage. Theo nods and says he understands, then promises he'll handle this situation immediately and that Tyler won't be working here by the end of the week. I leave the gym feeling strange, like I accomplished something important, but it doesn't actually make me feel better. Tyler facing consequences at work doesn't fix the fact that Joan betrayed me or heal the years of trauma from his bullying. I drive back to my brother's apartment and spend the rest of the afternoon just sitting on his couch staring at nothing, my mind blank and exhausted. 2 days pass in a weird fog where I go to work and come back to my brother's place and try not to think too much about everything. Then Lucas calls me Wednesday afternoon while I'm eating lunch at my desk. He sounds excited as he tells me that Theo fired Tyler yesterday and that the gym owner is now considering whether to file a formal complaint with the state licensing board for personal trainers. Lucas says that kind of complaint could result in Tyler losing his certification entirely, which would make it hard for him to work as a trainer anywhere. I thank Lucas for the update and tell him I appreciate him checking in, but after we hang up I realize I feel empty instead of victorious. Tyler getting fired and possibly losing his license is justice, but it doesn't actually change anything about my situation with Joan. The betrayal still happened, the trust is still broken, and Tyler facing professional consequences doesn't magically repair my marriage or make me feel less hurt. That evening, Joan texts me from a number I almost don't recognize until I remember she's staying at Scarlett's place. The message says Tyler contacted her from a different phone number, that he was angry and blaming her for him losing his job at the gym. She says she didn't respond to him at all, but wanted me to know in case he tries to reach out to me too. I appreciate her telling me this, and immediately screenshot Tyler's message that she forwarded, saving it to a folder on my phone in case we need documentation later for a restraining order. I text Joan back thanking her for the heads up and telling her to block that number too. Then I add that if Tyler contacts her again from any number, she should document it but not engage. She responds quickly saying she will, and then there's a pause before another message comes through, asking if we can talk about starting counseling together. I stare at that message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wants to say no, that counseling feels like admitting I'm willing to work on the marriage when I'm still so angry and hurt. But another part knows I need help processing everything I'm feeling, and maybe having a professional guide that conversation would be better than trying to figure this out alone. I text back saying I'll agree to couples counseling, but I make it clear this doesn't mean I've decided to stay married, just that I need help communicating everything I'm feeling right now. Joan responds immediately with relief in her words, saying she'll find someone good and set up the first appointment as soon as possible. 3 days later, we're sitting in a counselor's office in uncomfortable chairs that don't match, with Joan on one side and me on the other, and this older woman named Janine between us taking notes. The session is tense from the start, with Joan crying before Janine even asks the first real question. I explain the whole situation as calmly as I can, starting with Tyler bullying me in high school and ending with the recording where he admits to targeting Joan deliberately. Janine listens carefully and validates my pain, saying what Tyler did was manipulative and cruel, and that Joan's choices allowed that manipulation to damage our marriage. Then she turns to Joan and asks her to explain her perspective without making excuses or deflecting blame. Joan struggles through an explanation about feeling lonely with my work travel and liking the attention Tyler gave her, but Janine gently pushes back every time Joan starts to justify her choices instead of owning them. By the end of the hour, I feel drained but slightly less alone, like having a professional witness to this mess makes it more real and manageable somehow. We schedule another appointment for the following week, and Janine gives us both homework about identifying our needs and boundaries. Over the next 2 weeks, we have 2 more sessions, and in the third one, something shifts. Joan finally stops deflecting and takes full responsibility for her choices without trying to explain them away or make them sound less bad than they were. She admits she was flattered by Tyler's attention and liked feeling wanted, that she put those feelings above our marriage and her own values. She tells Janine and me that she understands if I can't forgive her, but she wants to become someone worthy of forgiveness, whether we stay together or not. Hearing her say that without crying or making excuses makes something loosen in my chest, like maybe there's a path forward even if I can't see it clearly yet. In that same session, I tell Joan and Janine that the hardest part isn't even the emotional affair itself. It's that she chose to believe Tyler over me for months when I tried to express my concerns about him. She made me feel paranoid and controlling when my instincts were right all along, and that gaslighting hurt almost as much as the betrayal. Joan's face crumples when I say this, and she tells me she can see now how she dismissed my feelings and made me doubt myself, that realizing what she did makes her physically sick. Janine validates both of our experiences and helps us understand how Joan's need for validation made her vulnerable to Tyler's manipulation, while my history with Tyler made me hesitate to speak up more forcefully. The session ends with homework about communication patterns and identifying moments where we shut each other down instead of listening. A few days after that third session, Scarlett reaches out to me privately through a text message, apologizing for not seeing what was happening between Joan and Tyler. She says Joan mentioned him constantly, but always framed it as innocent friendship, and Scarlett didn't realize how inappropriate things had gotten until everything exploded. She tells me that whatever I decide about the marriage, she supports me completely and thinks I deserve better than what Joan put me through. I appreciate Scarlett reaching out and tell her I don't blame her for not seeing it, that Joan hid the extent of things from everyone, including herself. Over the next few weeks, I start noticing small changes in Joan that feel genuine instead of performative. She's in individual therapy now, working on her own issues, trying to understand why she was vulnerable to Tyler's manipulation and addressing insecurities she never dealt with before. She sends me thoughtful text messages occasionally, not pushing for us to get back together, but sharing insights from her therapy sessions about patterns she's recognizing in herself. The messages feel different from her earlier desperate apologies, more self-aware and less focused on making me feel sorry for her. My own therapy with Cordelia continues weekly, and in one session she helps me connect dots I hadn't seen before. She explains how Tyler's bullying created patterns where I second-guess myself and avoid speaking up even when something feels wrong. I stayed quiet about my discomfort with Tyler being Joan's trainer for way too long because part of me still felt like that powerless kid who couldn't fight back against the popular guy. Cordelia helps me see that advocating for my own needs and boundaries isn't controlling behavior. It's healthy self-advocacy that I have every right to practice. She gives me exercises for recognizing when I'm falling into old patterns of silencing myself to avoid conflict, and slowly I start feeling more confident about trusting my own judgment instead of always deferring to what other people think is reasonable. Lucas calls me on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after the dinner with Joan and asks if I want to grab drinks with some guys from college. I haven't seen most of them in over a year, and the thought of being around people who knew me before all this mess sounds good. I tell him yes, and he says he'll text me the details. The bar he picks is one we used to go to back in college, a place with dark wood booths and sports playing on every screen. I arrive and see Lucas already sitting with 3 other guys I recognize immediately. There's Steve, who was my roommate junior year, Jake, who we played intramural basketball with, and Errol, who always organized the fantasy football league. They wave me over and I slide into the booth feeling nervous about what Lucas might have already told them. Steve orders a round of beers and asks how I've been, and I can tell from the way he asks that Lucas filled them in on at least some of what happened. I decide to just be honest because these guys have known me long enough that pretending everything is fine would be obvious. I start talking, and once I begin, I can't stop. I tell them about Tyler being my high school bully, about Joan hiring him as her trainer, about the messages and the emotional affair, and my brother seeing Tyler's car at my house. I tell them about the recording I made and playing it for Joan, and watching her realize she'd been manipulated. They listen without interrupting, and when I finish, Jake shakes his head and says, "That's some seriously messed up stuff." Steve asks if I'm planning to divorce Joan, and I tell him I don't know yet, that we're doing counseling, but I'm still trying to figure out if I can trust her again. Errol surprises me by sharing that his wife had an emotional thing with a coworker 2 years ago, and they almost split up. He says it took him a long time to get past it, but they worked through it, and their marriage is stronger now. He tells me the hardest part was accepting that his wife made a choice that hurt him and learning to forgive her without forgetting what happened. Jake talks about his own divorce from 3 years ago and how he wished he'd tried harder to save it before giving up. He says marriage is complicated and nobody outside the relationship really understands all the factors. Steve adds that whatever I decide, the important thing is being able to live with my choice 5 years from now. He asks if I think I'll regret staying or regret leaving more. I sit with that question for a while and realize I don't have a clear answer yet. The conversation shifts to lighter topics after that, but Steve's question stays in my head. We talk about work and sports and old college stories that make me laugh for the first time in weeks. When we're leaving, Lucas pulls me aside and tells me he's proud of how I'm handling everything, that a lot of guys would have just blown up their whole life in anger. I thank him and drive home feeling less alone than I have since this started. 2 months pass with Joan staying at Scarlett's place and me living in our house alone. We've had 4 more counseling sessions and countless difficult conversations. I've watched her work on herself in therapy and seen her take real accountability for what she did. The anger I felt initially has faded into something more complicated, a mix of hurt and understanding and cautious hope. I text Joan one evening and ask if she wants to have dinner to talk about what comes next. She responds within seconds saying yes and asking when. I pick a restaurant halfway between our house and Scarlett's apartment, a quiet Italian place we've been to before. I arrive first and get a table in the back corner away from other diners. Joan walks in 10 minutes later looking nervous and thinner than I remember. Her face is drawn and there are dark circles under her eyes that makeup can't quite hide. She sits down across from me and folds her hands on the table. The waiter comes over and we both order without really looking at the menu. Once he leaves, Joan asks how I've been, and I tell her honestly that I've been thinking a lot about us and what I want. She nods and waits for me to continue. I take a breath and tell her I've been working through everything in therapy, trying to understand why this happened and whether we can fix it. I say I can see she's doing real work to change, and that means something to me. Joan's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't let them fall. I tell her I've been thinking about whether I can rebuild trust with her and what that would actually look like in practice. She asks if I've made a decision, and I tell her I'm willing to try reconciliation, but only under very specific conditions. Her face shows relief and fear at the same time. I lay out my conditions clearly so there's no confusion. First, we continue couples therapy for at least another 6 months with no exceptions. Second, complete transparency with phones and schedules, meaning I need to be able to check her phone anytime, and she tells me where she's going and when she'll be back. Third, if Tyler contacts her workplace or shows up anywhere near her, she finds a new job immediately, no matter how inconvenient. Joan agrees to everything before I even finish listing them. She's crying now and reaching across the table for my hand. I let her take it, but I don't squeeze back. I tell her this is a trial period, and I reserve the right to change my mind if I can't get past the betrayal. I need her to understand that agreeing to try doesn't mean everything is fixed or that I've forgiven her completely. She nods and says she understands, that she's grateful I'm giving her any chance at all. She tells me she'll do whatever it takes and spend the rest of her life proving I made the right choice. I believe she means it in this moment, but I also know that intentions and actions are different things. Our food arrives and we eat mostly in silence, both of us processing what this decision means. When the check comes, I pay, and we walk out to the parking lot together. Joan asks if she can hug me, and I say yes. She wraps her arms around me, and I feel her shaking. I hug her back, but it feels different from it used to, more careful and less certain. We separate, and I tell her we can talk about logistics for her moving back home. She smiles through her tears and says, "Thank you," over and over. I drive home alone and sit in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, wondering if I'm making the right choice or the biggest mistake of my life. Joan moves back home the following week on a Saturday morning. She arrives with just 2 suitcases since most of her stuff never left. I help her carry them upstairs to our bedroom, and the whole thing feels strange and formal. We're both hyper-aware of each other, moving carefully around the space like we're strangers sharing an apartment. She unpacks her clothes while I watch, and neither of us knows what to say. That first night, we sleep in the same bed, but stay on our respective sides with a gap between us. I wake up several times and find myself watching her sleep, trying to reconcile this person with the one who betrayed me. The next morning, Joan gets up early and makes coffee. She brings me a cup in bed the way she used to, and asks what my plans are for the day. I tell her I have some work to catch up on, and she says she'll stay out of my way. The dynamic feels wrong, too polite and distant, but I don't know how else to act. Over the next few days, Joan shows me her phone every evening without me asking. She gives me her work schedule each morning and texts me throughout the day with updates about where she is. When she goes to the grocery store, she sends me a photo of the parking lot. When she stops for gas, she tells me which station. It feels mechanical and excessive, but I appreciate that she's following through on the transparency condition. I check her phone randomly a few times and find nothing concerning. Her messages are all work-related or conversations with Scarlett about normal things. I start to relax slightly, but I'm still watching for any sign that she's hiding something. Joan asks if we can have dinner together one night, and I agree. She cooks pasta, and we sit at our kitchen table making small talk about our days. It feels like we're playing house, going through the motions of being married without the actual connection underneath. After dinner, she does the dishes, and I go to my office to work. When I come out an hour later, she's watching TV on the couch. She looks up and asks if I want to join her. I sit on the other end of the couch, and we watch some show neither of us really cares about. The silence between us isn't comfortable, but it isn't hostile either. It's just empty. 3 weeks into Joan being back home, I'm at work when I get a text from Scarlett asking if I have a minute to talk. I call her during my lunch break, and she tells me Joan ran into Tyler at the grocery store yesterday. My stomach drops, and I ask why Joan didn't tell me. Scarlett says Joan was planning to, but wanted to wait until I got home, so she could explain in person. I hang up with Scarlett and immediately call Joan. She answers on the first ring, and I can hear the panic in her voice when she says hello. I ask her why I had to hear from Scarlett that she saw Tyler instead of hearing it directly from her. Joan starts apologizing and saying she was going to tell me tonight, that she didn't want to upset me over text while I was at work. I tell her that's exactly the kind of thinking that got us here in the first place, her deciding what I can handle and when I should know things. She's quiet for a moment and then asks if I can come home, so we can talk face to face. I tell her I'll be there in 30 minutes and hang up. The drive home feels longer than it is, and I'm angry in a way I haven't been since the early days of this mess. When I walk in, Joan is sitting on the couch waiting for me. Her face is red from crying, and she stands up when she sees me. I don't sit down. I ask her to tell me exactly what happened at the grocery store. She explains she was in the produce section when she saw Tyler across the store near the meat counter. He saw her too, and just stared at her with this cold, angry look. She grabbed what she needed and left quickly without any interaction. She says nothing happened and she didn't want to ruin my workday by texting me something upsetting. I tell her I don't care about my workday being ruined. I care about her being honest with me immediately when anything involving Tyler happens. I remind her that hiding things, even small things she thinks will upset me, is exactly what broke my trust before. I need her to tell me everything, even if she thinks it will make me angry or worried. Joan nods and says she understands, that she was wrong to wait, and it won't happen again. I ask her if there's anything else she hasn't told me, and she swears there isn't. I want to believe her, but this incident makes me doubt whether she really understands what transparency means. We sit down and talk for another hour about communication and trust. Joan promises to tell me immediately if anything like this happens again, no matter how small it seems. I tell her I need to be able to trust that she's not filtering information based on what she thinks I can handle. By the end of the conversation, I'm exhausted and she's apologizing repeatedly. I don't know if this fight moved us forward or backward. After that fight, something shifts. Joan starts being completely transparent to an almost excessive degree. She tells me every time a male coworker talks to her and what they discussed. She mentions when the guy at the coffee shop made small talk while making her latte. She texts me if she has to work late with her male boss on a project. At first, I appreciate the effort, but after a few days, it starts feeling like too much information. I don't need to know every mundane interaction she has with men throughout her day. Our counselor brings this up in our next session and helps us find a middle ground between my need for transparency and what's reasonable to share. She suggests Joan focus on telling me about interactions that feel meaningful or unusual rather than every casual conversation. Joan agrees and asks me what level of detail I actually need to feel secure. I think about it and tell her I need to know about anything involving Tyler, obviously, any situation where someone is flirting with her or crossing boundaries, and any plans that involve being alone with another man. Regular work conversations and casual interactions don't need to be reported. Joan seems relieved to have clearer guidelines, and I feel better having defined what transparency actually means for us. Over the next few weeks, the communication starts feeling less forced and more natural. Joan tells me things that matter without drowning me in irrelevant details. I stop checking her phone as obsessively because I'm starting to trust that she'll tell me if something important happens. We have dinner together most nights now, and the conversation flows more easily. We're not back to where we were before Tyler, but we're building something new that feels more honest. One night, Joan reaches for my hand while we're watching TV and I don't pull away. It's a small moment, but it feels significant. 3 months after Joan moved back home, she brings up the idea of taking a weekend trip together. She suggests going to a cabin in the mountains like we used to do before everything fell apart. I'm hesitant because the last time we went to that cabin was a year ago, when things were good between us, and I don't know if trying to recreate that will help or hurt. Joan says she's not trying to pretend the past few months didn't happen, but she wants us to have dedicated time away from our normal routine to reconnect. She's already looked at availability and found a weekend 3 weeks out. I think about it for a few days and finally agree because I can see she's genuinely trying, and I want to meet her effort. She books the cabin and seems excited in a way I haven't seen since before Tyler. The 3 weeks leading up to the trip, we continue counseling and working on our communication. I notice Joan is more present and engaged, asking about my day and really listening to my answers. She's also more affectionate, touching my arm when she walks past or sitting closer to me on the couch. I'm still cautious, but I'm starting to let my guard down slightly. The Friday we leave for the cabin, I take a half day from work and we drive up together. The drive is quiet at first, but Joan puts on music we both like, and we start talking about random things. By the time we arrive at the cabin 2 hours later, the tension has eased. The cabin looks exactly like I remember, a small wooden structure surrounded by pine trees with a view of the mountains. We unpack our bags and Joan suggests going for a hike before dinner. We walk a trail we've done before, and the physical activity feels good. That night we cook dinner together in the tiny kitchen and eat on the porch watching the sunset. Joan asks if I remember our first trip here, and I say yes. She says she was so happy that weekend, and she wants us to find our way back to feeling like that again. I tell her I want that too, but I need her to understand it's going to take time. She nods and says she knows, that she's willing to be patient as long as I'm willing to keep trying. Saturday morning, I wake up before Joan and sit on the porch with coffee watching the sun come up over the mountains. Joan joins me 20 minutes later and we sit in comfortable silence. She eventually asks what I'm thinking about, and I tell her I'm thinking about forgiveness and what it actually means. I explain that I'm starting to forgive her, that I can see the work she's putting in, and I appreciate her patience with my healing process. Joan starts crying and reaches for my hand. I let her hold it and tell her I'm not completely there yet, but I'm moving in that direction. She says that means everything to her, and she'll spend the rest of her life proving I made the right choice and giving her another chance. I believe she means it, even though I know rebuilding trust will take years, not months. We spend the rest of the weekend hiking and talking and being together without the weight of our daily routine. On Sunday afternoon before we leave, Joan thanks me for agreeing to this trip. She says she feels closer to me than she has since everything happened. I feel it too, but I don't say that out loud yet. The drive home is easier than the drive up. We stop for lunch at a diner and Joan tells me about a project she's working on at her job. I realize I haven't heard her talk about work with enthusiasm in months. When we get home that night, we unpack together, and Joan asks if we can keep doing trips like this regularly. I tell her yes, and she smiles in a way that reminds me why I fell in love with her 7 years ago. A week after we get back from the cabin, I'm at my desk at work when a LinkedIn notification pops up. It's a message from Tyler. My first instinct is to delete it without reading, but I force myself to open it. The message says I ruined his career and reputation over nothing, that he lost his training license and can't find work in his field because of me. He calls me vindictive and says I always was a weak person who couldn't handle competition. I screenshot the message immediately and block him on the platform. I report the message to LinkedIn for harassment and then forward the screenshot to Lucas with a note asking him to save it in case we need it for a restraining order later. I sit at my desk feeling my heart race and my hands shake. Part of me wants to respond and tell Tyler exactly what I think of him, but I know engaging would only make things worse. I text Joan and tell her Tyler contacted me through LinkedIn. She calls me right away asking if I'm okay and what he said. I read her the message and she's quiet for a moment before saying she's sorry he's still trying to cause problems. She asks if I want her to come meet me, but I tell her I'm fine and I'll see her at home tonight. The rest of the day I'm distracted thinking about Tyler and whether he'll try anything else. When I get home, Joan has dinner ready and asks if I want to talk about the message. I tell her there's nothing to talk about, that Tyler is angry about facing consequences for his actions, and I'm not going to let him derail the progress we're making. Joan nods and says she's proud of how I handled it. We eat dinner and don't mention Tyler again. Later that night, I check LinkedIn and see that my harassment report was processed and Tyler's message was removed. I feel a small sense of satisfaction knowing he can't use that platform to contact me anymore. 6 months after everything exploded, Joan and I are sitting in our living room on a Tuesday evening when she brings up an idea she's been thinking about. She says she wants us to renew our vows in a small private ceremony with just our families and closest friends. She explains it's not about pretending the betrayal didn't happen, but about acknowledging we're choosing each other again with full knowledge of our flaws and capacity to hurt each other. I'm surprised by the suggestion, and I sit with it for a few minutes before responding. I tell her I like the idea, but I want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons. She says she understands and we can take time to think about it. Over the next 2 weeks, we discuss it more in counseling and with our families. My brother is supportive and says he thinks it could be a meaningful way to mark this new chapter. Joan's parents are cautiously optimistic and say they'll support whatever we decide. We set a date for 2 months out and keep the guest list small. Joan works with Scarlett to plan something simple and meaningful. The day of the ceremony arrives and I wake up feeling nervous but certain. We get ready separately and meet at a small venue we rented for the afternoon. Our families are there along with Lucas, Scarlett, and a few other close friends. The ceremony is short and personal. We each wrote vows that acknowledge what we've been through and what we're committing to moving forward. When Joan reads hers, she talks about taking accountability for her choices and promising to be worthy of my trust. When I read mine, I talk about choosing forgiveness and believing in second chances while also honoring the pain of what happened. We exchange new rings we picked out together, and the officiant pronounces us married again. Afterward, we have a small reception with food and drinks. My brother pulls me aside during the reception and tells me privately he's proud of how I handled everything. He says a lot of men would have either given up immediately or stayed out of weakness, but I made a conscious choice based on what I wanted for my future. His words mean more than he probably knows. Joan and I leave the reception early and go home together. That night, we sit on our couch and she asks if I have any regrets about today. I tell her no, that I'm choosing us, and I believe we can build something stronger than what we had before. She cries happy tears and says she loves me. I say it back and mean it. The reception feels warm and comfortable, people laughing and talking around us while Joan and I sit close together on a small couch in the corner. Scarlett walks over with 2 glasses of champagne and hands them to us before sitting in the chair across from us. She looks at Joan for a moment and then turns to me with a serious expression that doesn't match the celebration happening around us. She tells me she needs to say something and asks if we can step outside for a minute. I glance at Joan, who nods and squeezes my hand before I follow Scarlett out to the patio where it's quieter. Scarlett crosses her arms and looks at me directly, saying she's watched Joan closely over the past year and she sees a real difference in her friend. She explains that Joan is more self-aware and honest than she's ever been in all the years they've known each other. Scarlett says she knows I didn't have to give Joan another chance, that a lot of people told me to walk away and never look back, She adds that she respects how I made the choice that felt right for me, regardless of what anyone else thought I should do. I thank her and tell her it wasn't easy, that there were days I almost changed my mind. Scarlett nods and says she can imagine. Then she mentions that Joan talks about the work we're doing in therapy and how committed we both are to rebuilding trust. She puts her hand on my arm and says she's proud of both of us for doing the hard work instead of taking the easy way out. We go back inside and rejoin the party, and I feel lighter somehow, knowing that Joan's closest friend sees the changes too. I continue seeing Cordelia every other week, even after our couples counseling sessions become less frequent. The individual therapy helped me work through more than just the affair and Joan's betrayal. We spend sessions talking about the old bullying trauma from Tyler and how it shaped the way I interact with people even now as an adult. Cordelia helps me recognize patterns where I avoid conflict or second-guess my own instincts because part of me still feels like that powerless kid in high school. She teaches me techniques for advocating for myself in all areas of my life, not just my marriage. I start speaking up more at work during meetings, sharing my ideas instead of staying quiet and hoping someone else will say what I'm thinking. My boss notices the change and pulls me into his office one afternoon to tell me there's a senior position opening up and he thinks I should apply for it. I feel that old hesitation creeping in, the voice telling me I'm not qualified enough or someone else deserves it more. But then I remember what Cordelia said about recognizing when my trauma is speaking versus when my rational mind is assessing a situation. I tell my boss I'm interested, and I submit my application that same day. 3 weeks later, I get the promotion along with a significant raise. Joan cries happy tears when I tell her, saying she's so proud of how far I've come. I realize the therapy gave me tools that extend far beyond fixing my marriage, that I'm becoming someone who actually believes in his own worth. Joan comes home from work one evening and tells me she started volunteering with a women's group that helps people rebuild after relationship betrayals. I'm surprised at first because I didn't know she was looking into volunteer work. She explains that she found the group online while researching resources for people who have been betrayed, but then she saw they also had a program for people who had been the ones to betray trust. She says being honest about her role as the person who caused the damage has been healing in ways she didn't expect. The group meets twice a month, and Joan shares her story with other women who are trying to understand why they made the choices they made. She tells me that helping others recognize manipulation patterns and warning signs gives her a sense of purpose beyond just fixing our marriage. I watch her talk about the volunteer work, and I see genuine passion in her eyes, something I haven't seen in a long time. She mentions a woman in the group who reminds her of herself from a year ago, someone who got caught up in attention from someone outside her marriage and now regrets everything. Joan says she was able to share what she learned in therapy, and the woman thanked her afterwards for being so honest. I tell Joan I'm proud of how she's turned her guilt into something constructive instead of just wallowing in shame. She smiles and says she'll never stop trying to be better than the person who hurt me. A full year passes since the crisis exploded and destroyed everything we thought we knew about our marriage. Joan and I are in a genuinely good place now. Better in some ways than before because we're more honest and intentional about our relationship. We don't take each other for granted anymore or assume everything is fine just because we're not fighting. We still have hard days when my trust wavers or she feels guilty about what she did. Sometimes I'll see her texting someone and feel that spike of anxiety before I remind myself she's been completely transparent for 12 months straight. Sometimes she'll catch me being quiet and withdrawn and worry that I'm pulling away from her again. But we've learned to communicate through those moments instead of hiding from them or pretending they don't exist. We talk about the triggers when they happen, instead of letting them build up into resentment. Our marriage counselor tells us during one of our now monthly check-ins that we're one of her success stories, that most couples who go through what we went through don't make it to the other side. She says the difference is that we both committed fully to the work, instead of just going through the motions. Joan reaches for my hand when the counselor says this, and I squeeze back, both of us knowing how close we came to losing everything. I'm grabbing coffee one Saturday morning at the shop near our house when I see Theo standing in line ahead of me. I haven't talked to him since that meeting at his gym over a year ago when I brought him the recording of Tyler admitting everything. He turns around and recognizes me immediately, his face breaking into a smile as he shakes my hand. We get our coffees and sit at a table by the window, and Theo tells me he's been meaning to reach out but wasn't sure if I'd want to hear from him. I tell him it's fine and ask how things are going at the gym. He says business is good, and they implemented new policies about trainer-client boundaries after everything that happened with Tyler. He mentions that Tyler moved to another state about 6 months ago after losing his training license due to the ethics complaints that were filed. Theo thanks me again for coming forward because it turned out there were 2 other women who had similar experiences with Tyler crossing boundaries, and my recording gave them the courage to file their own complaints. He says the gym dodged a serious lawsuit because they were able to show they took immediate action once they knew what was happening. I tell Theo I'm glad it worked out, and that knowing Tyler faced real consequences brings me closure. But I also mentioned that I've stopped defining my healing by what happened to him, that my focus now is on building something good with Joan, rather than dwelling on the person who tried to destroy us. Joan and I spend our weekends touring houses in neighborhoods we've talked about moving to for years. We both agree we need to leave behind the space where so much betrayal happened and start fresh in a home we choose together with our renewed commitment. The realtor shows us a house with a big backyard and updated kitchen, and Joan's eyes light up as she walks through the rooms. She points out where we could put our furniture and talks about hosting dinners for our friends and family. I stand in the empty living room and imagine us building new memories here, ones that aren't tainted by Tyler or the affair or all the pain of the past year. We make an offer that same day and it gets accepted within 48 hours. As we sign the paperwork a week later, I realize I'm genuinely excited about our future in a way I wasn't sure I'd ever feel again. The journey was brutal, and the scars remain, both of us carrying marks from what happened that will probably never fully fade. But we're building something stronger and more honest than what we had before, a marriage based on real transparency instead of comfortable assumptions. Joan looks at me across the table as we finish signing and asks if I'm happy with this choice. I tell her yes, that this feels like the truest kind of victory, not pretending the past didn't happen, but choosing to move forward anyway. We drive to our old house to start packing, both of us ready to close this chapter and begin the next one together.